So hello, I'm going to talk now today about the whole police political situation that's going on. I don't like, before I go into anything, I should say I don't like actually having to do this. I don't like talking about this type of politics. I say that all the time. This is the stuff I feel compelled to against my will. But I don't usually like talking about this kind of stuff. I should preface by saying that I have been fairly distraught at kind of the general political moment that I think the world finds itself in ever since around March of this year. I've found it very hard to really like do anything other than have to think about politics with all the shit that's been going on. It started with COVID, where all kinds of conservatives were talking about, and or not conservatives, but like libertarian-minded people who were just insisting that having to wear a mask or having to go outside or having to, not go outside, having to stay in was insane, and you shouldn't, why are people required to do this? It's ridiculous. And I was just, my interpretation of that was like, that they were being ridiculous babies in response to the whole pandemic. Now we have this whole police thing, and I suppose this is like probably a good moment that I'm finally sinking my teeth as deeper than I have ever done before into like a mainstream political topic. Yay, this is fun. And I'll tell you why I don't like doing this right off the bat. The reason I don't like doing this is because I inherently recognized how complicated every single one of these issues are. As soon as somebody posts a video of something online, there's an immediate fucking just outrage, like clash. One narrative against the other. And from my perspective, I look at it and I'm like, there's all these facts that you just don't know. There's things that you're hearing, there's things that you learn, and every single like argument just gives you more details and facts that realistically should affect the narrative that you use, but it doesn't seem to happen. And what's happened now with George Floyd is that my interpretation is that we have a situation where people are actually just like running wild with the narrative that they have. And it's as if all like logic and reason and deliberation has just kind of evaporated. I don't really know what to call it. I don't know how to explain it. I have never felt ever in all of the political stuff that's happened in the past like 10 years ever felt like this level of people just not being logical. I don't even know, I should say it like that. I don't actually know how or why this happened. I'm going to explain what I mean here with regards to being logical and being kind of how to analyze, I think, these situations. And I was having a conversation with my friend the other day about how hard it is to interpret what's right and wrong in every single political moment that happens. And we both kind of realized and agreed that the problem is when you get into enough details, you start to notice that every little factor affects every other little factor. And to get the right moral picture requires doing this shit full time. Like, you can't just be a reporter. You can't even just be a random political personality online. You can't be someone who thinks about this stuff. You literally have to sit down full time and start doing just research every single time one of these things happens. And I don't think any normal person has the time to do that. And unfortunately, the narratives that people use to analyze the situation don't come from just research. They come from them assuming something about what's going on and then just going with that, every single time they look at an additional piece of evidence. And and of course, with the way our like defense mechanisms work with regards to the narratives we think are true, we become very, very defensive if the narrative is challenged at all. It bakes into our like basic assumptions about how other people think and work, and when those narratives are violated, the guy who's doing it is just evil and wrong and stupid, and he needs to be shut down. I am going to say this video is, it's a little bit bleak. So let's get into the reality of the whole police thing. My issue with police stuff in general. So I have always been aware of this narrative up until now. I've always been aware of the general narrative that you have on the left, that the police are assholes. Okay? I'm coming at this from just like a perspective of how the information has unfolded from where I'm standing. I've always been aware of this narrative that police are assholes. It's a very intuitive narrative. There's movies that talk about how they're assholes. There's television shows that show how they're assholes. There's accounts of police, brutality and assholism. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, the police are assholes. That's easy to believe. That's not unintuitive. I never knew any of the specifics. The idea that police are corrupt. Also, there's never knew any of the specifics. However, in my head, I never assumed. What is that? There's something weird with the ground. Oh, never mind. I never assumed. I never thought that was a complete description of the reality of policing. Never did I think that you could that was just the narrative. That was overwhelmingly what the police just were. That they were just assholes. I never thought that. I never thought that because at the same time, you're taught in school, right? When you're in trouble, you call the cops. When you have crimes committed, you call the cops. You want crime prevention, you call the cops. Of course, it's basic intuition with regards to avoiding a problem. So lots of basic intuition would have a person believe that the cops are also a force for good in society. Okay? The idea that cops are a force for good in society and assholes at the same time, not a very complex narrative to grapple with. It's very possible that both of those things are true at once. That some cops are assholes, that even many of them are assholes. Hell, even if all of them are assholes, that still doesn't actually mean they're not a force for good in society. To actually go from that into thinking that the cops are a force for bad requires a dialectical shift that I frankly don't understand. I'm going to say it right off the bat. I am not I cannot be as anti-police as the current zeitgeist crowd appears to have interpreted all of these killings and this whole situation. I don't actually understand it. I would have never even predicted it, that people would be this anti-police. Being anti-police to an extent, sure, finding cops to be assholes, problematic, even race, none of that is fucking it's yeah, that's all bad and that's there. But the shift from that, the concept of cops itself is bad, which is the shift that has happened with this whole movement, this whole moment, that is a shift that I would have never predicted. And I don't actually agree with it, and I'm going to explain why over the course of this video. So, when the George Floyd protests started, I was initially for it. I understood it. Protests happen in the United States all the time. Oh, okay, they're protesting. That makes sense. Why wouldn't they protest? Of course. Another situation like this, these situations happen all the time. I never fully learned the details of all of them prior to now. But, yeah, the situations are fucked up. They are especially fucked up in I think they are more fucked up... Well, okay, no, I'm not ready to make that claim, but at the very least, the situations that happen are they are symbolically very fucked up from a racial perspective, seen to the black community. It's very fucked up to just have these kinds of incidents happen. That I understand. The fact that there were protests, even riots, made perfect sense. However, at a certain point, after the first week of protests. Understandably, of course, the socioeconomic moment for black people in the United States is problematic. I started finding issue with the logic of the protests themselves, and I'm going to the logic with what they were trying to do in response to what was happening. Because to think that there would be this much outrage over George Floyd, that's fine. To get this upset, absolutely. Get upset as you want. The emotions are very well justified. But the ideas on how to solve it don't have to be justified at all. And that's the problem. Defunding and abolishing the police, I know nobody fully believes that. in the strictest sense. But even this like vector of progress that people have selected in response to this stuff may not actually be justified. I'm going to talk like when this whole thing started. I should actually say, like, I was actually the one, like, I was on Twitter arguing with conservatives about how Chauvin wasn't even a murder. People were saying, some conservatives were saying it wasn't, sorry, not Chauvin, Floyd. Floyd wasn't murdered. It's the thing, it's manslaughter at best. I'm like, no, you can definitely, there's definitely murder that could have happened here. And I was arguing with one conservative guy who was saying, well, relatively conservative, but he was saying how it's definitely not first-degree murder. It's definitely not first-degree murder. I'm like, okay, it's not first-degree. He's not charged with first-degree, right? He's charged with second-degree. First-degree, no one's saying that it's first-degree. This guy didn't, like, seem to understand. He's like, he kept saying, it's not first-degree, it's not first-degree. Yeah, okay, that's like, this is the kind of thing where, okay, it's not down, but that doesn't mean, like, if it's not first-degree, there are other degrees of murder that exist. Looking backwards, I don't actually think that it is even second degree, because legally speaking, the way second degree is defined, second degree murder is there's two forms of it. There's killing someone with intent in the moment of death that's not premeditated, or unintentionally killing someone in the moment where they die through a felony, through a armed robbery or an assault or something like that. And this was not that, because they didn't just choose to assault him. This qualifies as third-degree murder, where they chose to use a police procedure with a depraved heart, with indifference towards the man's life. That's the situation. That's the category, legally speaking, that this falls under. Not necessarily the category that this morally falls under. I want to make that very clear. Legality is not the same thing as morality. Yeah, like, please understand in the course of this video, we can always talk about how to redefine legality. But legally speaking, there is no evidence that this was second degree. There's evidence that this is third degree. So, why then the charge was upped from third to second degree seems artificial. And it could have been done for two reasons. I have heard an argument on the left that what they sometimes do is that they will charge cops an exorbitantly high, like an unreasonable charge, so that they can then be found not guilty on that charge and be, convicted for something a lot lesser. So there's that. So there's that issue. But it could also be the case that the second degree charge is a response to the protests and the outrage for the case of optics from the perspective of the police department. I would not put it past them. The outrage, like the anger and the protests have gone on for so long that it's quite possible that they have, juked their desired solution, the expected solution, in order to kind of satiate the crowd. And here's the thing I want to make absolutely clear: a crowd of people. A crowd of people have every right to be emotional about any given political situation. That does not mean that their understanding of how to solve the situation is actually, correct. I don't see how Floyd in particular could be thought of as someone who committed Chauvin could be thought of someone who committed second-degree murder. Because there was no intent to assault. There was no intention to assault Floyd. There was an intention... There wasn't even necessarily an intention to kill him in the moment. There, at best, was an intention to not give a fuck if the man died, which is what I think happened, right? Chauvin didn't seem to care whether Floyd would die or not, and he chose to restrain him with a neck restraint for 9 minutes, and the man died. That could easily be a depraved heart, is the point. However, I have to preface this now by saying even though that possibility cannot be ruled out, it could also be the case that this was not a depraved heart. It could also be the case that this was negligence or incompetence or stupidity or any number of things. I know that sounds unreasonable, but bear with me, okay? Based on the evidence that we have on that situation, what happened was Floyd was arrested, he was restrained and handcuffed, then they led him to the car, Before he got in the car, he started complaining that he couldn't breathe. Then they tried to get him in the car, right? And he refused to get in, and he dropped to the ground. And then they chose to do the neck restraint. Now, the neck restraint thing itself already seems fucking barbaric. However, according to Minneapolis police manual, it's a thing that they're actually just allowed to do. In their manual, there are two types of restraints. One of them is a non-lethal neck restraint that is done with a knee or a leg, and then there's a choke, and which is not supposed to be a chokehold, but a neck restraint that's supposed to be non-lethal. In their manual, it's listed as a non-lethal technique. They also have chokeholds in their manual, which are listed as a lethal technique, and chokeholds are only allowed to be used in life or death situations. This was not a chokehold. This was a neck restraint, which, regardless of how you think, it's listed as a non-lethal technique. So a bunch of idiot cops who may or may not understand anatomy, they did not necessarily think they were using a lethal technique based on that. Now, I know that sounds like, and here's the thing, the reason this happened, this is possible, is because everybody who watches the video assumed, because I assumed, I don't know how about everybody else, but I assumed that Floyd was choked. But based on the first autopsy done by the police in Corner, he was not actually choked. He had like a heart problem, he had drugs in his system, there's a whole like cardiac, I don't think it was cardiac arrest that actually killed him, and he had COVID. He had trouble breathing before he got on the ground. Now, my initial interpretation of that was like, okay, if he had trouble breathing, why exactly would you then put him in that kind of a restraint, right? You're putting a leg on his fucking neck, right? Like that's going to make breathing harder, and I'm pretty sure the neck restraint is designed for that. Now, I think the reason the neck restraint is in the non-lethal category, whereas chokehold is in the lethal category, is because neck restraint, it's hard to like completely choke someone without cutting off their airway completely, and it's hard to do that by pressing like against the side of their neck. It's possible, right? It's possible that what happened was the neck restraint is meant to cut off part of the airway, not the entire thing. And in order for the victim, the person being restrained, to be kind of like knocked out, like airway is partially obstructed, so that they have trouble. It's harder for them to breathe, so that they essentially are forced to like calm down. I'm not sure about the exact specifics, but I can imagine that that's the kind of like thing that this tool is meant to do. Whether this is a correct technique or not, right, it doesn't have to be a correct technique. That is the understanding that the officers had when they found Floyd. So from that perspective, there was not inherently a reason to assume that this move would have killed him. However, there's the other side of the story, which is the fact that if he said he wasn't breathing, to then use a technique that obstructs breathing even partially makes that shit, exacerbates that problem. So what probably actually happened to Floyd was that he had trouble breathing, then the problem was exacerbated by the police, and then he died. And yes, I'm aware that there's a second autopsy involved in this as well, but the second autopsy completely contradicts the first. And the second autopsy says that he was choked in such a way where there are no signs that he was choked. The first autopsy says there's drugs in his system, there's all this stuff, he went into cardiac arrest. And there are no signs of the trachea or whatever being damaged, which is what would happen if you were choked. So they could be making all of that stuff up, naturally. They could be, it's not impossible, but I don't know if you can just assume that they're making that stuff up. Like the Eric Garner scenario, for example, everybody agreed. The independent autopsy and the autopsy done by the police agreed that Garner was choked, right? And a chokehold is a lethal move. So if a neck restraint is listed as a non-lethal move and the cops are using it, and it's not meant to choke and someone died from it, that's not the same situation as the situation where it is a lethal move or it is what killed him because he actually did choke. The narratives that are spawned from the second autopsy and the first autopsy cannot be more different. And I don't know if you can just assume that the first autopsy is bullshit, because, well, why would it be? If there was precedent to the fact that a neck restraint is non-lethal, if it was in their manual, then this was already something that was established in the process of policing. It's not something that they're just making up the second that this happened to make it look good. And they did fire the cops, when it initially happened. So there's a lot of questions in terms of how to actually understand the situation in terms of who is responsible. There's almost certainly responsibility, even if the neck restraint is non-lethal, even if the neck restraint is ordained by Minneapolis police, even if all of this, the actual process is supposedly allowed. And I know that that's a different, there's a question there that I'll get to, but even if it's allowed, you have the first line of culpability, I would say, is Chauvin. The question is, would Floyd have died in anybody else's custody? Would any other set of cops, set of 4, have chose to use the neck restraint? Did they do the neck restraint correctly? Did they do it properly? Did they account for the actual reality of the situation? Did they just choose not to believe what Floyd was saying about how he couldn't breathe beforehand for no fucking reason? I don't know. We still don't have certain evidence, so we don't have their body cam footage, we don't have their testimony, we don't know for sure, why they chose to do what they did, and I think there is obviously a question as to whether any set of cops in that department would have done the same thing. And if they wouldn't, then it's obviously the fault of this squadron of 4. Now, I know people also have been calling for the arrest of the other officers, and that one is a harder sell for me. I don't think that the other officers who were this was their first day on the job or whatever, they were new to, are as responsible as Floyd. Sorry, as Chauvin. They're not as responsible, I keep mixing them up. They're as responsible as Chauvin because, well, it's their first day on the job, and they questioned why Chauvin was choosing to do the neck restraint. So they weren't necessarily on board with what was going on. You need to hear their fucking explanation of their side of the story to know. There is an argument that people... So, okay, I understand that everything I've said so far is taking seriously the version of the story that the cops have and the version of the story that the legal system has. I know that people want to just say, well, this is obviously corruption and it's fucked up. But can you believe that without finding additional evidence of why people are doing certain things, right? In terms of what's going on in the world as a whole. Right? You can't just assume that there's corruption because a situation looks bad when you see the video, right? We assumed it's corruption because we assume the man is being choked. We assume he's being choked to death. But that's not what happens, right? His breathing was already struggling, and him being restrained on top of that exacerbated the problem that was happening in his heart, and that's what killed him, right? He wasn't choked, which is what everybody thought. By the way, if I'm getting any details wrong on the reality of this case, feel free to correct me in the comments section. I know, it's impossible. I know I don't have all the perfect information, right? But yeah, you can't just assume that, and because you can't assume that, you have to look at every single piece of evidence in full individual detail. Now, there is the other side of this, which is the fact that obviously these neck restraints are not allowed on all police departments in the country. There are police experts that say that these neck restraints should be banned completely. Apparently, cops have tried different kinds of neck restraints over the years, and they have varying levels of success. There's also the other factor that supports the side of the outrage side of this is the fact that a neck restraint. It sets a bad precedent, because if you're allowed to use a neck restraint against the guy you're arresting, and that person has a condition, a pre-existing condition, which Floyd did, the neck restraint could kill them, and it's kind of unfair to just allow that as a policy when people have pre-existing conditions. I don't think it makes sense that I don't think it makes sense to basically give cops the green light to like accidentally kill people without taking account whether they have conditions. That may not be easy to account for, but nonetheless we should figure out a way to account for it in some way. Maybe they shouldn't be able to use these kinds of neck restraints, and they should be banned altogether. And that is going to be a conversation. So that's the other thing. This goes outside of just Chauvin. It's the responsibility of the Minneapolis Police Department and their policy to ban this kind of neck restraint and train cops to use it properly. So yeah, there's all these factors, right? There's all these factors. I do think it is very likely that what Chauvin did was incorrect. He didn't give a fuck if he could kill Floyd, and yeah, that's where it is. And obviously, all the questions about police reform come up as a result. So that's Floyd. That's Floyd. That's I would say is a fair interpretation of the Floyd thing. Floyd, it's a tragedy of what happened to Floyd, and I don't think, and the police who did it have to be held responsible, and the system that allowed the specific processes that led to this happening also have to be held responsible. But that's where the situation ends for Floyd. Beyond that, we have a whole bunch of other situations and protests, and in every single one, in almost every single one of these cases, even in the Floyd case, there are mitigating factors that make it seem less bad what the cops actually did. Even in the Floyd case. Floyd is the worst one out of all of these for sure. That's happened this year. Actually, I never looked at the details of Ahmaud Arbery, but Floyd is definitely the worst one out of all the recent ones. But for almost all of them, there are mitigating factors. And I do think that most of what should happen in response politically is a call for reforming the way the police are expected to do this. The concept of I'll get to defunding later, but you can probably tell where this is going. So the next, that's basically Floyd. The next case is Breonna Taylor, so what happened with Breonna Taylor was, the cops invade a home. The cops bust into their house. They don't announce themselves. The guy starts shooting them. He starts shooting back. Her boyfriend starts shooting. They start shooting back, and Breonna gets shot in the crossfire. That's the situation as it's reported. Okay? Sorry, my nose. And everyone, and you assume this, okay, the cops just didn't knock. That sounds fucked up, right? Except for the fact that they had a no-knock arrest warrant. Right, that was issued by a judge that they didn't have to knock on the house. They didn't have to knock before entering the property. They didn't have to knock and announce themselves. Now, I didn't even know no-knock arrest warrants existed, but apparently they do. You don't have to knock when entering the property, which means from the perspective of actualizing justice, I don't understand why anyone still thinks that the Breonna Taylor's killers deserve to be tried for this, unless there's details I'm not aware of. Forgive me if there are any, but based on these facts alone, there isn't anything. Now, people have also said that it wasn't even the right house, but that actually isn't true. It was the right house. What they were doing was they were investigating one house that was said to be connected to drugs, and they thought that this house was connected to that first house. So they went to this house. They didn't knock because they had a no-knock arrest warrant. They burst in, and then they fucking, and a shootout happens because a no-knock arrest warrant is a stupid fucking idea, and then she ends up dying. That's obviously fucked up. The situation is fucked up, but I don't see how you can blame the cops for this. That's what bothers me about this one. This one actually bothers me. I understand, Floyd is fully fucking justified outrage, but the fact that there's people all over the internet that are upset about Breonna Taylor and want those killers, I'm sorry, I don't understand why that's there. If the concept of a no-knock arrest warrant exists and it's been used and it was issued by a fucking judge, how is it the actual cops' fault? I'm not saying it's nobody's fault, by the way. I'm not saying you can't fucking be outraged at something, but you should focus your outrage on that thing which is responsible. Well, how are the cops the ones at fault for this? They're just using the warrant that they were given. There is an argument here that some people make where they just they say that the cops should still act with human decency rather than being bullies and assholes, because that's like what the Nazis would do. There's this comparison of like Nazi soldiers being told to execute people, and how a moral person should deny that, should refuse to accept those orders. Perhaps the thing is, in Breonna Taylor's case, that's not really how it is. They were not ordered to kill Breonna Taylor. They were not ordered to kill anyone. They were ordered to search the property using a no-knock arrest warrant. No-knock arrest warrant is not a order to do a fucking... to commit a crime. It's not an order to kill someone. It's an order to just search a property. It's an order that bears with it an inherently high probability of collateral damage, but it is not an order that in and of itself is a call to cause actual damage. So I don't think it's fair to demand that, morally speaking, a cop should deny that type of order. Like, the cops that learn about this stuff, they don't understand, they don't know any of the fucking, like, the legal details. They don't learn about whether or not it makes any sense. To them, this whole thing is like a complex fucking system of rules and principles, and they're just told, okay, no-knock warrant, you execute it like this. They are not, like, it is not their job to keep in mind the greater details of whether or not this is fair. So I don't see how you can blame the cops. You can blame the judge, you can blame the system, and you can blame the concept of no-knock warrants themselves, which is what they did. After the City Council of Louisville announced, they made a law named after Breonna, called Breonna's Law, where no-knock warrants are banned, which is good. Frankly speaking, there is, I suppose, somewhat of a question of whether the whole system is corrupt just here, because the concept of a no-knock warrant sounds insane to me. Like, the concept of a no-knock warrant is so inherently going to, like, cause collateral damage that I don't know why anyone would use it. Supposedly, the reason that they use them is because with a no-knock, they use a no-knock warrant if there's a chance that any drug evidence will be destroyed if the cops have to announce themselves before entering the building. No-knock warrant gives them the opportunity to get the jump. I find that a little bit suspicious. It's a little strange, because especially considering that, like, no-knock warrants haven't even been around. Like, they've been banned in England since, like, the 1600s. Like, it's very weird why these things exist. It's possible that these are, like, a recent invention and addition in response to the drug war, in which case we have to address the drug war, politically speaking. So you have that. But I still would insist that there is no cause here to look for blame in the actual police that killed Breonna Taylor themselves. And they haven't actually, they've been fired. I don't know if they intend to fire or been fired. They have been fired. And fine, I would say we can go with that, although frankly, I don't even know if they should have been fired. Because the procedure itself should have been changed, and then they should have been retrained in a new form of procedure. Or straight up just ban this procedure outright. Because this is straight up like authorized use of force that causes a death. Right? By all the strict definitions that allow for authorized use of force. Then we have Rayshard Brooks. I'm covering these guys just because it's like, yeah, I mean, these are the things that happen. So Rayshard Brooks was someone who they were responding to, I think, a domestic violence arrest or whatever, no, domestic violence issue. He was a drunk man. He was sleeping in his car. He fought with two cops. And then he tased one of them, or tried to tase one of them. Then he ran away, and then they shot him. I have to admit, I really find it hard to understand why people find this one so egregious. The idea that cops shoot people who attack them is not new. It's something they've been doing since forever. Especially if those people have weapons or have used weapons, and there's reason to think that they're violent. Like, there's reason to think that he's violent. There's reason to think he's running to his car, he could get another weapon. He could get in the car and start mowing people down. Like, I don't really know how to have this conversation. Like, I feel like if the cops are in a situation where someone is causing violence, like someone has attacked them and is clearly causing violence, they have an intent to cause violence, and the cops are justified to respond with violence, right? I don't see evidence, I have not seen evidence, rather, that the cops just wanted to kill him for the sake, because they're fucking bloodthirsty killers, like that. Maybe they could have used a different weapon, maybe they didn't have to shoot him with guns, maybe they didn't have to shoot him, you know, lethally, but they shot him, you know? The fact that they shot him at all does not seem unfair. I don't know. I don't really know what to say here, because prior to this year, a situation like this would have shocked absolutely nobody, right? Nobody would have been this upset over the idea that the cops shot someone who attacked them. Like, people who attack cops can do all kinds of shit. I saw a video the other day of the cops trying to stop a guy. They stopped and tried to arrest a guy on the highway, a black guy, and he acted very calm and seemed to fucking, he turned around, get ready to handcuff, and then he just started fighting them. He started fighting two of these cops. He wrestled with them, and one of the cops is way bigger than him, but he still managed to wrestle, away from them. He wrangled himself free. Then he leaped into his car, grabbed a gun, and then shot one of the cops. And then got into the car and drove away. These are the kinds of fucking situations that can happen in the United States, I don't see how you can talk about the policy itself of when cops are allowed to use police force. Why would you ever think, though, that that the cops who did that, who were in that situation, or the Rayshard Brooks situations, are racist or bloodthirsty killers or whatever they are, that they chose to do this? They are trained to respond to the perceived threat of violence that they see. So, where's the problem? What evidence? What is there to indicate that there's something wrong with their intention or their understanding of what they're doing? And the reason I'm really saying this, and my biggest fucking argument, because I don't have proof that any cops are good human beings all the time. I don't. But my proof, my evidence is simply the fact that it's as if the world has changed its mind on what this is. Prior to now, everyone would talk about how the cops are assholes, but no one would ever think that the cops are evil. That they're just out there to fucking kill people. But now, it's as if everyone has just agreed that that's what happens. Right? It's as if, do you ever get that feeling where everyone has, had a conversation somewhere that you weren't part of, and they've left the room, and now they've decided what the truth is, and you have no fucking say? Because that's how I feel. I was never under the impression that cops were holistically evil. But this is, or holistically even, poorly, holistically corrupt or ill-intentioned. But that is the narrative that seems to be pervading social media now. And I kind of don't see what it's based on, other than, unrestrained outrage over, a few incidents. And while these incidents may all be fucked up to a degree, I find it very hard to believe that they are as fucked up as people are saying they are. It's a lot easier to believe that a lot of this is fueled by COVID-19, by the general political unrest that exists, and by the media trying to twist people's words and trying to twist the reality of how our legal system works, and just trying to, and of course, wokest, postmodernist fucking subjectivity culture, which that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, factually speaking, where is the problem? Where is the problem? You can definitely make the claim empirically that there is a problem, but you can't prove it without having hard evidence that it's happening. And most of the evidence that I see is people reading a story online that mentions how the cops did something. It fails to bring up a key detail in how cops are supposed to do things, and people just get outraged. They're like, oh my god, cops are just killing us. There was a story today of like cops in Malton barged into a door and like killed a 62-year-old man. But even that, people were reacting to that like that was that was an egregious problem. But the cops barged in the door. They yelled for him to put down the gun. They shot him with rubber bullets, and then they shot him afterwards with real bullets after the rubber bullets didn't work. Okay. What evidence is there that this is some sort of form of that this was an incident of police brutality? If the man was schizophrenic or ill, he could have literally been trying to like suicide by cop, right? Which is a thing that happens. Like I don't know what percentage of suicides, but there is such a thing as suicide by cops. You call the police on yourself and then you draw a weapon so that they fucking kill you, because that's what they're supposed to do if you draw a weapon. Yeah, like these situations are explainable with other narratives. So how is it that everyone's just agreed that the narrative is that the cops are bad? Like how has this happened? Right? There have been a lot of these incidents, but even that has never been enough to really... It's not just that people are saying there's a systemic problem. It's the idea that there's a systemic problem that's like... It's the idea that there's this systemic problem that's like fucking medieval. Like that we're in some sort of dictatorship and there are no policies or laws or written like legal language that authorizes a lot of these things. You know, and I'm pretty sure people react partially without knowing how the law is already meant to be interpreted. You know, how the legal system is already designed, and maybe that's wrong. Like maybe all of that should be reformed, but you can't exactly just blame the system for abiding by the rules that it has officially sanctioned. Right? You can question the rules, but you can't just assume that, because the argument is not that the rules are bad. The argument is that the cops aren't following them. Do you understand? That's the argument. The assumption is that the cops are somehow breaking the inherent rules of like human decency and morality and even legality. But they're not. There is no evidence of them doing that. There is only evidence of the rules themselves being fucked up, like the no-knock warrant. I had an argument about this the other day with a few of my friends, and one of the points I immediately raised is that statistically speaking, there is reason to think that a lot of police violence is justified. There are databases that cover police violence, and most police violence, over 80%, is then killing people who are armed. Okay, 50% is people who are armed with firearms. Now, there's an argument here whether the cops should even shoot. There is an argument here of whether it even makes sense for the cops to shoot someone that has a firearm. Maybe it makes sense for the cops to wait to be shot at and then shoot back. But that's a fucking strange argument, right? Because if you're going to go down that road, you're essentially saying that the cops have to literally take a bullet, risk taking a bullet before shooting back. And that is a tall order, given... Yeah, that is a tall order given how I think criminal violence works in this country. You also have to remember that it's very easy to get a gun in this country. A person who doesn't have a gun could easily have a gun, yeah, right, and they might shoot you, and you have to anticipate those kinds of situations. Now, I have no doubt that the cops are probably not good at anticipating them a lot of the time. They do need more training. They do need to have, like, you know, go in with nuance in mind and be willing to do the right thing, not just, you know, the thing that they're told. But nonetheless, it's not the kind of thing where you can just assume the cops are evil when the amount of violence that just happens in the country on its own, regardless of the police involvement, is already pretty bad. Like, this is not a society that's safe. There's so many of these fucking stupid posts where people are just like, Norway, you know, 1 cop shooting a year. Fucking Finland, like 3 cop shootings a year. Germany, it's like, okay, this is a ridiculous comparison. It's a ridiculous comparison because these countries are tiny, for one. They are much smaller. They are ethnically homogenous. That's another part. They have completely different economic policies on top of that. Like, there's a million things about them that are different. To simply compare the way the police work in the two countries is like, it's not apples to apples at all because you haven't controlled for like the myriad of variables that impact the difference. a lot of police violence could be a reaction to civilian violence, right? There's now, granted, I will admit, even in terms of police violence, even if you account for population density, which these fucking posts obviously never do, they never account for population density. Even in terms of population density, yeah, the police kill more people for every 10 million than some countries in Africa do. Well, assuming those statistics are correct, obviously. Assuming that any of these statistics are correct, because these statistics are on Wikipedia, the police don't actually kill that many people, but it's more perhaps than they should, and that should obviously be addressed and looked at. And it could be argued that the riots are like the loud fucking alarm bell that tells people we should now listen to people and try to really analyze all the problems of policing. Maybe none of these problems were being looked at prior now, in which case it's a good thing. However, I still have to caution every progressive thinker out there who wants to just solve the police problem. You can't assume, based on any of the facts, that the police are as corrupt as these idiot, non-analytical, non-statistical posts would have you think. You cannot just compare this country to a country like Norway or Germany. Germany's a closer comparison because it's like 1/4 the population. But again, ethnic homogeneity, different economic policy, different like level of poverty and everything like that. And that's the other thing. Obviously, poverty and gun laws have something to do with the level of violence in the country and thus the level of police response. So that's another thing to just like consider in all this. Right? It's actually, this is what I mean by like, to actually get to the truth of these scenarios, you need to spend your whole fucking time, all of your time, researching every detail of everything. And I do think in the wake of that, it's very fucking dangerous to just have people floating around, flying these fucking flags and messages of how the cops are all corrupt, look at all these developed countries, they never have any of these problems, blah, 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 blah. We just need to fucking uncritically and analytically believe that the cops are just evil from front to center. Because the problem is what that does is that actually escalates the problem and you know, it compels the cops to be less charitable in response to like the protests and shit. It beckons the cops to care less about what it is that they're responding to, you know, and then police start walking off the job. You know, they start walking off the job and then they start protesting themselves, and then all of a sudden the country descends into pure fucking chaos. It doesn't make sense when to logically demand nonsensical solutions, even if the emotions in reaction to this stuff are you know, high and fully justified. I realize, by the way, I'm talking about all this from the perspective of someone who's white, from the perspective of someone who's not poor, who is not experienced police brutality in any way, shape, or form. However, that's still, that is true, and that has obviously skewed my perspective, but that doesn't change any of the facts regarding what police actually do. Whether most police are doing their job as described is not a matter of white privilege or you know, not. It's a matter of whether or not it's true. And I told my, like, I was arguing with my friends about this. My first statement to them was, you know, because we never usually talk about politics. It's never even gotten this fucking intense in recent years. That's part of why I'm upset. We bring up the fact that, like, okay, I wouldn't want to stay in the fucking United States if, like, the cops literally walk off the job, because this is a violent country and violent shit's going to happen to me. Okay? People seem to take issue with that. They're like, oh, what, you kind of like, you're not okay with, like, the protests? You don't think that's like, I don't want to stay in the country that's violent, is what I mean. Without the cops to fucking, like, offer protection, obviously. Without the cops to quell the violence, which would happen on its own. And that they didn't like that, because it's as if you're saying that the cops are actually doing something good some of the time. Yes, it's as if I'm saying that, because that is what I'm saying. And then I said, statistically speaking, a lot of the violence that cops respond to is justified. And that triggered everybody to high fucking heaven. Because statistically speaking, that is what's there. 80% of police killings are people who are armed. That should matter. Over 80%. It's like 83, I think. That should matter. Now, that could still be an enormous excess. Like 17% aren't armed. That's still fucked up. But 80% are armed. That is a good chunk of people that could very well have been violent that the police needed to put down. Why would that statistics bother people on the left? And here's the thing: the reaction to all of this, by the way, when I brought this point up, was, "Hey, that's white privilege thinking. What are you talking about? That's white privilege thinking. You can't just assume that the cops are right. You can't just assume that their statistics are good." Nobody even asked to see the damn statistics. Nobody asked to see them. They just assumed the statistics weren't true. Fucking hell. And the funny thing is, I asked, okay, if the statistics are false, what's the alternative? Oh, well, people have personal experiences. And I'm like, okay, are there statistics of those personal experiences? Are there statistics for the experiences themselves of police brutality and stuff that people talk about all the time? Because those statistics exist. You can measure those statistics, right? How many times has someone who's been innocent had the cops, affect them? Like, you could talk to people that this happens to, right? You could talk to people who have been impacted by police brutality, who claim to have been impacted by police brutality, who didn't do anything wrong, because if they did something wrong, there would be a crime record of them reported somewhere, and you could measure how often that actually happens. And those statistics have to exist somewhere, but nobody even brought that up. Right? Are there statistics demonstrating the case that the people who are taking issue with the cops to this extent have? Right? The people who have these personal experiences. Because you need to have some way of communicating the impact of personal experience. Everybody has personal experience. You need to numerically demonstrate its impact. Nobody brought up these statistics. If these statistics exist, by the way, please put them in the comments, because I actually want to know what they are. Right? I want to know what the situation there is, because this part actually fucking matters. Right? Lots of people could have an experience with the cops that is like, either neutral or bad, and like less than neutral or bad, and report it, and then you have an actual record outside of like police databases of when the cops have done something wrong. Actual accounts of people's experiences when they think the police have done something wrong. And in response to that, you of course have the police record of when they're following all the rules, but they get in trouble because the people that they're trying to arrest or deal with don't know the rules that the police are allowed to follow. And I do think a chunk of this problem just comes down to that. People don't understand the rules the police are actually allowed to follow and the ones they're not. They assume that the cops have to follow the same rules that you do when confronting them, and then when cops come up to them and they start fucking like demanding shit, people are just like, "What are you doing, man? Why are you trying to fucking fuck with me, man? Nothing's wrong." I am sure that if people some amount of police violence is people just not understanding how police are allowed to work in the first place. I had this argument. Somebody in this whole altercation with people where they refused to bring up any statistics to refute the ones that I had. They start firing articles at me that describe the various like police injustices that exist. They bring up Breonna Taylor. I've already addressed that in this video. They bring up there was a thing that happened with the Parkland shooting where a cop refused to intervene as a shooter was going through the school, and he was then sued by the families of the victims, and the Supreme Court the Supreme Court found that he was innocent. That's what happened, right? And this was touted as on Mises.org or .net or whatever, that police don't have a constitutional obligation to defend you, right? Police can just stand by and watch a crime happen, and that they are not in violation of the Constitution. And that sounds really fucking bad, right? There were three articles that talked about this, that all made it out like this, and it sounds so fucking horrible. Holy shit. The police don't have to legally protect you, right? Except, if you actually look at it in detail, that's not how that works. They're not legally obligated to keep you alive. That doesn't mean they're not supposed to prevent the crime. The way people fucking read this and interpreted it was, this means that a cop can just stand while a crime happens next to them and they're not doing anything wrong. That's not actually true. That's not actually true. The police are required by their own mandate to intervene and prevent a crime if it's happening. They are required to do it. There's also the 14th Amendment, which says that at the end of the 14th Amendment, all people within jurisdiction are required, like, what the fuck is the exact line? It's the state can't deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Right? So they cannot deny you protection from the law, which means protection from crime if you're in that jurisdiction. Unless, of course, the people say, well, constitutionally, there is no law that says they have to protect you from the law. But that's not how that works. The reason, okay, it's actually a lot less bad than it sounds if you understand the way, like, legal systems work to begin with. Legal systems have what's called a doing and allowing distinction, right? Just because there is a law that says such and such action is illegal, that doesn't mean non-prevention of that action is also illegal. It's not equally illegal to not prevent an act as it is to do it. For example, did you know, for example, that in the United States, there are no laws for not calling in a crime that's happening? It's not illegal to not report a crime. Except for in specific circumstances. But generally speaking, in most states, it's not illegal to not report a crime. Why? Because non-prevention is not the same thing as direct action. Legal systems are designed to punish, first and foremost, active crime, first and fucking foremost, not passive allowance of crime. Doing and allowing are not the same thing. And the reason why actually makes perfect sense if you look at the philosophy of law itself. You cannot have a doing and allowing equivalence. To have that is to assume that the enforcement of the law is a binary system where, doing X is the same thing as not doing X. But it doesn't follow like that. Doing X is not the same thing as not doing X. Doing X is not the same thing as not preventing X. Because the set of circumstances and actions around non-prevention is far wider and more complex than the set of circumstances around actively doing the crime to begin with. You could be non-preventing a crime by simply walking by as a crime happens, right? You could be not preventing a crime by hearing about a crime, not realizing that it's a crime, and not calling it in. You could be not preventing it by simply not taking the responsibility. You could be not preventing a crime or not reporting it because you're afraid of doing it because you're being because you will be ratted out if you do. There are a million different circumstances where non-prevention makes perfect sense from a perspective of what is feasible, right, for human beings to do, right? For example, if not preventing a crime was a crime in the same way that doing a crime was, maybe not in the same way, but it was a crime in the same way that doing a crime was, from the sense of you could be punishable for it, then that means if people are walking down the street and someone commits a crime, everybody around who doesn't call 911 now has to be punished by law. It would be ridiculous. It would be ridiculous. The only way there's an exception to this is if there's specific circumstances where you are somehow abetting the crime or causing it, or you know of a crime that's serious enough and you don't report it. But the simple act of a crime happening, because there's a million different things that constitute as crimes, not reporting it doesn't automatically make you guilty. Which makes perfect sense, because the legal system cannot account for all of those people that just didn't call 911. That's way too hard. The law is first and foremost designed in terms of what it can do, not in terms of what it should do. The same thing applies for cops. Cops are not legally required to not prevent crimes, because if they were legally required to prevent crimes, that means you would be able to sue a cop or put them in jail if they failed to prevent a crime. And there's a million reasons why they might fail to... not even fail to prevent a crime, but fail to save the person's life that a crime is happening against. So, if you're a cop and you're running after a guy down the street and that person shoots at the cop, misses, and hits a random civilian, what it would mean if the cop were constitutionally required to save for the life of a person that a criminal could affect, that cop would now be punishable by law for having let that person get hit by the bullet. That doesn't make any sense. This does not actually mean that cops can just sit by while fucking crime is happening and do nothing. That's not what it means. Because if they do that, they're in violation of their mandate, and you have the 14th Amendment. But it doesn't mean that if crime is happening, cops are trying to respond, and the crime still happens, that the cops are legally liable for the lives of those people themselves. The only exception to that is if it's someone in police custody. Because if it's someone in police custody, then the cops are required by law to secure that person's life, because it is assumed that by being in custody, the police have complete control over what's happening, right? And this includes people that, if they're transporting someone, or they're in like a police building, like in a jail cell or whatever. That is a different situation, is my point. But again, the reason I explain all of this is that you bring up like these articles that just mention how this stuff works, completely not understand, like taking things that officials have said, taking the things that random justices say, and say, oh, look at how bad the legal system is, the cops don't even have to fucking protect us. No, they do have to protect you, because they're mandated to fucking protect you. If they violate their mandate, they get fired. They get fired and replaced, and that's what's supposed to happen. What happened in Parkland, by the way, was still fucked up, because the cop did refuse to actually do what he was supposed to do. He didn't go after the guy who was shooting up the school, and that was supposedly not actually correct police procedure. But the point is that to have a legal requirement that the cops have to intervene means that each cop is punishable by law if somehow they don't, and that's not reasonable to do. These are the fucking realities of like the law. I've seen this before, that the legal system as is designed in terms of what it can do before what people want it to do. And it seems like people are reacting to it in terms of their sense of like what human decency would require in an ideal world, rather than what the legal system is actually physically capable of doing based on how you interpret all the different laws and statutes and things written down. So that's where we are. Holy shit, I'm an hour in. So then that's where we are. That's how you have it. I definitely think all of this stuff presented that there is a problem with how people interpret the police. If there is a problem with police violence as is, there is certainly a problem with how people interpret the police and the police's job. It's also just like the logic of policing. Like, you understand that law is only as good as what is written down in law. Like, law can't account for every action of every police person, right? So you can't assume that the law is somehow your perfect protector. Law is something that constantly has to change in response to new evidence, new cases, new information, and new political decisions. But it's not something that is designed already to be perfect. It's only as good as the information that it has, and only as good as the stuff that's actually been written down in law. Take this example to try and get this point home. Imagine for a second that you have a group of 5 people, right? This is a society of 5 people, and we all decide, the society of 5 people, we're going to have a rule: nobody can eat cheese. This is a rule. If you eat cheese, you are punishable, right? We put you in jail if you eat cheese. Okay, and then they say, Mr. Creamy, theoretical artist, your job is to prevent people from eating cheese. You have to enforce this law. If you find someone eating cheese, throw their ass in jail. Okay, that's now. So the rule of not eating cheese is the Constitution rule. That's what we put in our Constitution. The rule of enforcement is not the same as the rule in the Constitution. The rule that I have to follow as the enforcer of that rule is not actually the rule that I'm enforcing. And that's what people don't seem to understand about the concept of policing to begin with. The laws of enforcement are not the same thing as the laws that are being enforced. By definition, because in order to enforce them, you have to operate by the written laws of enforcement themselves. And the written laws of enforcement will always contain some room for a police person to step outside of the law. This is not something that is constructed, right, in a top-down society that has policing. This is something that is inherent to the concept of policing itself. You cannot have you have a system of rules that you want to enforce, and then you have a system of rules that defines what the enforcement itself is. But the rules of enforcement are not, by definition, are outside of the rules that are being enforced. And you have to keep that in mind when understanding how law is already applied. This does not mean, of course, that the police are not corrupt. Every police person in this country could be corrupt for all I fucking know. But it doesn't actually matter from the perspective of progressive theory, because you need to, if you're going to want to build the world in a better place, you need to think about how you, not just what the rules are supposed to be, but how the rules are supposed to be enforced, and how the rules governing enforcement should be given what the rules actually are. People who are outraged about this don't actually think about what the law already says, because they are not the ones trying to design a better world with its own laws. That's the reaction that I seem to have. And that brings us to defund the police versus and abolish the police. Defund versus abolish. One sec. Just didn't give him the text. The idea of defund and abolish the police is when I started to find a problem with the entire reaction to all of these police situations. I do think that the idea of defund and abolish itself has exacerbated the problem. And the biggest issue with it is that it doesn't seem to respect the logic of policing that I've already just described in full detail. It seems to be a paranoid reaction to the concept of policing that doesn't realize, or even that doesn't seem to think to assume that policing is a part of our society, regardless of whether you think that abolishing the police is even possible or good, because I don't think it's either of those. But if you think, even if forget about it, even if we assume it is good, even if we assume it is possible, there is no way in fuck that it is possible given the state of the world today. Given the state of this society, even other societies, any society, there's not a single society that is ready for defunding or removing the police. If the banner being flown was reform the police, if the banner being flown was change the police, improve the police, anything like that, it's not. But it's not improve the police, it's remove the police. And that's the wrong way to think about it. That's not how this works. If you can't just take something like policing, design a society without it. And there is no evidence that I have seen that can realistically convince me that such a thing has existed. I know that there's a lot of like anthropological evidence and stuff of like societies that have had very different concepts of policing, sure. But I can't think that a single one of them assumes that police is something you could ever do without. And the problem is, these positions about defund and abolish do actually assume that. Because as soon as you understand that you cannot remove police, you cannot operate as if police don't ever need to exist, the entire equation changes. It now becomes about changing specific laws, changing principles of police procedure, changing all other aspects. And part of that is there. Admittedly, the defund policing like platform, lots of aspects of it make sense. There's ending the war on drugs, ending private prisons, having police cams, and then so on and so forth, like ending no-knock warrants. There's a lot of little things you can do that make perfect sense that would alleviate the problem. But that's not the point. The point is that the assumption is there that the police themselves don't need to be there at all. And that's the problem. That assumption is not correct. At the very least, I've not seen evidence to think that it is. This is a very dangerous line of thinking, and the reason I know it is because this was never even fucking around prior to this moment. Like, nobody ever talked about defunding or removing the police prior to now, right? Like, maybe some anarchist fucking circles did, but all of a sudden it's just exploded. Like, it's what people really want. Defunding and removing the police, abolishing the police, or See, here's the thing. Almost everyone will say we can't, like, people will understand, okay, we can't just remove the police. But they do seem to operate with the assumption that a society without police can somehow exist. And they should not have that assumption. That is an assumption that needs to go, right? You cannot ever operate with that. It might be possible. It might be possible to have a society where the police don't exist, but you should never fucking assume that for practical purposes, because that is such a far cry from the realities of policing in our world, especially in the United States, that it's not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, that's the biggest issue. We could discuss every other aspect of like the policing platform. That's fine, but to actually go in and say even defunding the police, it's as if people let's be completely fucking straight about how the police work in the United States. The police, as I understand them, are a hammer. And what we're doing is we're applying a hammer to certain problems that don't require a hammer. However, that sounds fucked up. And every progressive person, I'm sure, can agree, yeah, we shouldn't have a hammer for something that can be solved with a pen or a scalpel, right? Of course not. Of course not. However, this fucking the entire ideology, not even ideology, the entire idea and notion that's behind all this seems to have forgotten that hammers even matter to begin with. Whether you're using a hammer or a pen or a scalpel does not actually change anything about the nature of a hammer. Like, if I use a hammer to do surgery, I don't blame the hammer. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If you're using a hammer where you shouldn't be, you don't blame the hammer. But this is how people are doing. They are actually blaming the hammer. And that doesn't make any fucking sense. The police are a hammer. They are designed to be a hammer. Now, you could maybe argue we never... So that's the real fucking, like... That's the real weird kind of understanding of this people have. You have a hammer. You have a scalpel. You have a pen. You can solve all the problems carefully using these different tools, but you don't... use the hammer and then blame the hammer. I suppose this is the kind of reaction where someone just using a hammer and they get so angry they just throw the hammer to the side. It's the societal equivalent of that. But logically speaking, remember, you cannot just blame the hammer because it's the person using the hammer that's wrong. It's society approving the use of a hammer when it shouldn't. Like ending the drug wars, dealing with economic issues. These are things that can be done that could... reduce crime on their own, and then you wouldn't need to use a hammer. Defunding the police should be done as a reaction to condition. But here's the thing. People will understand that too, and they'll say, well, yeah, we shouldn't use the police, so defund them. No, you shouldn't just defund them. You should first, you can decrease funding for them, or increase funding for other things, increase funding for other programs, and only defund the police after conditions have improved. You don't just defund the police to begin with. You don't start by defunding the police and doing other things because now you can't account for the potential increase of violence that might happen. What happens when people realize there's no police in society, huh? That's how this should fucking work. Like, the fact that you want to defund first makes it seem like you actually think the police are the cause of the problem. And that seems to be the sentiment. The cops are causing the problem. The cops are causing the problem in violence in society. Are you serious? I don't think they are. I don't think they are. Maybe, they might be. Hell, fuck, I don't know all the details, obviously. Feel free to disagree with me and try to make that argument, but there needs to be a discussion about this. I don't think that the cops are causing the violence. I think there's a lot of factors that cause the violence, and to focus on policing as the problem completely misconstrues it. This is something that dangerous, like poorly thought out progressive revolutions have done in the past, and it has not led to good results. And that brings me to my next point, probably my final point, which is what this means for progressivism and improving the world as a whole going forward in response to all this. I have seen far too many people, normal people who have never been political, who were never talking or thinking about any of this shit, all of a sudden, they rise up, they want to defund the police, they want to have a revolution, and they are iconoclast. I've seen posts, people who have never been political, defending iconoclasm and removing statues. there is a long discussion. I might not even have time to get into the discussion about statue or racism. I know that these are fucking things, and there is a real discussion to have about whether you should have racist statues up in your society. But it should be a discussion rather than the decision done by a mob. I don't know the history of every single person that has a statue made out of them in the United States. Even Confederate statues, I don't know their history. You can't assume that those statues don't deserve to be up simply because they represented an idea at one point that was bad, right? Simply because they represent an idea that was bad. Like, even if they represent an idea that was bad, that's not necessarily reason to remove them. Now, people have said, no, remove them, put them in a museum. But even that is not necessarily good, because the statues, well, I don't know everything about every single Confederate general, I'm sure, but would you not have to consider if any of these people had any aspect of their historical record that was good, that merits that they have a statue in society? Is there to be a discussion about that, or are they all just holistically evil? I understand defacing some statues. That is par for the course as far as outrage. You know, you have what's it called? Like the King Leopold II in Antwerp. Like, that guy did fucked up shit. He allowed fucked up shit to happen. Defacing that statue and even ruining it is fine. But George Washington, like Gandhi, Columbus, like, here's the thing. All of these people, I'm sure, have done evil things. However, they have also had positive impacts on history, and we should also, give credit where credit is due. Right? A person's positives may outweigh their negatives, right? Those statues, even as symbols, are not as symbols of oppression. They could also be, to some, symbols of pride. Otherwise, what the fuck is the point? The argument otherwise is that you shouldn't have statues of people, right? But you should have statues of people, because people represent statues of people making statues of people is how we honor people that have had a strong and good historical impact. There are statues of Karl Marx in England that should be kept. I don't necessarily and I mean, obviously, again, I know that I don't know enough about the history of Confederate generals and all the shit that they did, but my first question comes in is that these people are also part of the historical identity of this country. Have they ever done anything good that merits a statue, or do they only represent evil because some people interpret it in that way? I don't know. Are they only racist? There are statues of characters that I think shouldn't fucking exist. There's probably a statue of Arthur Schopenhauer somewhere, and I don't think that guy deserves a statue. Hitler doesn't deserve a statue. But even there should be a conversation. And hell, I might even be in accepting of having a statue to someone who I really disagree with. On ideas and on morality, right? If the statue was good enough. There's also another aspect of statues where a statue of someone who was your historical oppressor or someone who you despise doesn't even necessarily need to be something you despise. You can view having a statue of someone who is meant to be a symbol of evil as a good thing, that you are able to not be affected by it. There's a level of personal empowerment that can exist there. It's like, this person no longer owns me. I'm no longer, this thing that is supposed to be a symbol of the power of this evil character in history doesn't even affect me. And it doesn't even affect me because of how much more powerful I am than him now. It could have that effect. It could have the effect of how some people are interpreting, statues of people who have done evil acts. If those acts don't bother you and you're able to feel, then perhaps you're even able to feel empowered at the idea of having a statue of an evil person, because you're better than them. The symbol of their impact doesn't even matter anymore, because their impact didn't amount to shit because of how much better you are than them. There's a whole conversation there, but you understand, hopefully some people understand what I mean there. There's a conversation about racism as well. The conversation about I haven't mentioned racism yet. I understand that, yeah, racism is obviously, I guess, so with regards to racism, this has spawned an enormous amount of conversation about racism. I don't want to get too deep into the conversation of racism. The reason I haven't talked about it yet, because I think we need to establish certain baselines about policing before we get into how racism works as a concept. Policing and racism are fundamentally different things. If you have a ethnically homogenous society, the concept of policing doesn't change, and that's something people need to understand based on what I've talked about before. Race confounds the concept of police, because if there's any kind of disproportionality in who is committing the crime, there's going to be disproportionality in who the police target, right? Police are a hammer. Remember, they don't care who's causing crime. Their impulse is to just fucking, to just go in and smash the criminals. That's all they fucking care about, right? The idea of racism in the country is, at this point, a matter of figuring out a way to make conditions better for black communities without hurting the system. I don't think focusing on police is just the way to do this, though. Like I've said before, legalizing drugs and which I don't think any fucking official is talking about, by the way, legalizing drugs and focusing on economic issues seems to be the way to do that. The police have nothing to do with it, and on top of that, I'm pretty sure I have that the conversation of race needs to be kind of revolutionized. There are many assumptions that both sides make about race that just aren't true. People on the right assume racism doesn't exist, that there's a way for racism to just not exist, which I don't agree with. That's not actually true. People on the left assume racism always exists, however, which I would say I agree with more. However, the caveat is that the left, the progressive wokest left, seems to think that racism is embedded in the nature of they seem to think that racism is embedded in the nature of this society itself, and that's what needs to be smashed. And that is also incorrect. That is actually perhaps even worse than the other side, because that's not what racism is embedded in. It's not. I don't think, at least, that's what racism is embedded in. I think it is more likely embedded in inherent perceptional assumptions that result from differences in outcome between races, and in differences between races. It's in those perceptional assumptions, not in the fact of how society itself is built. So while you do have a moral duty to try to decrease racism, actually even that is a fucking definitional thing, because I don't necessarily... There's a little nuance there, but I'm not going to get into this now. Even though you have a moral duty to decrease racism, the process of doing that is far more subtle, I think, at this point, than what the woke left has assumed. Because most of the problems don't seem to be caused by race, they seem to be caused by other things, and racism piggybacks off of those other things. That's the thing that actually happens. You understand? It's not that racism is not driving the attitudes of police. They do not, like, the system does not do everything because it hates black people. It does these things, like hating black people. The system does all the things that it does because of other reasons that are more economic, that are more like economics related in nature and history related in nature. The fact that the outcomes have always been different for black and white people, and that hasn't changed. Racism piggybacks off the difference. It doesn't actually cause the difference, and I think that's the biggest issue that the woke left has. They think that the difference is caused or exacerbated by racism, and it's really not. It's caused by specific structural things that have not actually changed, or have not, or even if they have changed, have not served to improve conditions. I don't want to get further into that. Please forgive me. Like, obviously, there is an enormous amount of literature about race and racism that I have not looked at, and I'm sure that there are arguments there that will sway my opinion to one extent or another, or change what I think. However, I'll just end it at that I think the race conversation is not solved yet, and we're not in a thing where it's just like a racist white society here, which is how people are interpreting it. And that's another whole fucking thing. The amount of fucking moral panic that has spawned in every fucking company, trying to go through this like ultra intense anti-racism training, trying to frame all historical like decisions that have been made in this country as part of like a racist, as somehow embedded with the concept of racism itself, is deeply misleading, and it may lead to bad things. Now, I've covered racism in statues. I'm going to look at my notes here, but I'm not going to cover community-driven police. I've already mentioned the thing about the hammer. Yeah, violent revolutions. I find it very hard to still, like, I think after all of this, I am categorically someone who, I cannot call myself a woke leftist. Like, I think wokeism is categorically just incorrect. Conservatism is also incorrect, but conservatism has the advantage of understanding how the system actually works. Wokeism does not. Wokeism assumes a standard of human decency that has never been logically rectified by the practical realities of human civilization itself, the way it's always worked. And that seems to be the problem that end. It becomes very hard to try to like think of ways to be progressive without everybody calling, well, we need violent revolution, we need violent revolution. Maybe we do. Maybe we do. But what happens when you want violent revolution and it's not logically caused or driven or even motivated, but emotionally motivated, is that you're not actually going to make society, well, you aren't actually going to make society better. You may have your revolution and you might change everything, but it's going to have its excesses. It's going to have its problems. It's going to create a system that may not actually be any better and may actually be worse in a lot of ways. That is the problem I have. That's the problem I have. I kind of fundamentally think we need to not, we should not valorize or fetishize the concept of violent revolution. Violent revolution is not a good idea. Virtually every stride that has happened in social political progress throughout human history has not happened purely due to violent revolution. No, not a single violent revolution happened. Not a single violent revolution was righteous by virtue of its violence. It was righteous because of specific ideas that actually made sense at the time that people refused to accept. The French Revolution was a shit show. Some of the things it tried to change were correct, but it was a shit show in how it actualized, and it caused fucking decades of war to come after. Right? Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, they managed to have a revolution from feudalism that created a republic without any violence. Right? In that country, the king agreed to step down. It didn't happen in France. How did that happen? It happened because no matter what the case is, there is a way to have a revolution without violence. It's almost always possible. I can think of very few exceptions to that. And even if it is possible that we are in a situation that there needs to be a revolution with violence, I find it very hard to believe, considering that there's moral outrage that's not driven by logic. Right? That the outrage is not tied to the inherent logic of how the system already works, as if it doesn't understand that logic. Everything I've talked about this video, people who think about revolution have not thought about any of this stuff. They have not thought about how to design their own legal system. They have not thought about how to design their own constitution. Because in anarchist land, people assume you don't need to think about things like legality or police, that human interaction will just work. It'll just work all, fine on its own. You don't have to fucking build entire complex legal systems. You don't have to have like fucking cops who have specific mandates and things have to be written down in ultra fine detail to make sure it all works. No. We can just be anarchists and the whole thing will somehow work out because human nature itself somehow allows for that. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? What makes you think that that's possible? Where in the fucking universe has that ever been possible? Even tribal societies had agreed upon rules that they followed. It was not this fluid fucking like subjective nihilistic, like everything is whatever we feel it is in that moment shit. Even fucking hippies, even a society of hippies would eventually have to start constructing solid, logical rules that their society is expected to follow. Because if it didn't, it would collapse in response to any first of all, it wouldn't build anything if it did, but it would eventually collapse, right, in response to any strong external force that it wasn't ready for. There's a lot of shit to fucking discuss here, and I'm saying, but like, I have been like progressive. I have never ever found anarchism appealing, and the least of it now, because it seems like progressivism is now really just about being an anarchist. It's about being more anarchic than than not, and yeah, I just don't see it. Like, people who have never been political, people who've never thought or talked about any of this stuff, all of a sudden have accepted ideas like you know, we should try to have a world with less police. What? People who've never even, like, people all over the internet, people on Instagram, people on Twitter, random fucking people who have never really participated in theoretical, political, philosophical discourse are now crying about how we got to make all these changes because all this stuff is bad. We have to remove all this stuff because all this stuff is bad. I don't trust that. I'm sorry. I don't trust it because I don't trust the fact that all of these people suddenly have an opinion on this stuff, right? That suddenly they start shoving around, throwing around, you know, statistical accounts of what happens in other countries as if the situations are apples to apples, and assuming that that means you know, we gotta make radical change really fast. We gotta make radical change very fast. Radical change does not mean immediate radical change, right? Even anarchists have to understand that. Radical change does not mean radical change tomorrow. Radical change does not mean radical change in a year. Radical change could mean a million tiny changes over time that turn radical over a long period. Fucking Chaz has a list of fucking demands that it has. You can't have all those demands. You're just not going to be able to make them work. If you were in control of government yourself, if Chad, the people in Chaz literally had control of the United States government, if all people in the U.S. government, the fucking, you know, all the lawmakers, all the politicians, everyone just stepped down, these Chaz motherfuckers would not be able to make their own list of demands happen, because it just doesn't fucking, it's so complicated to get any of those things to happen. Any of them, even one of them. There are a few things that are mostly simple, and those are the things you can do, and you do them, and then eventually you get to a better world, but you don't just cry about ending the system. The only logic I can understand on behalf of this whole violent revolution thing is if we assume that the system is so bad that we need to shove the Overton window in the direction of all these new policies. That's the only thing that needs to happen, right? That we need to be as extreme as possible to get them to notice us. Well, in that case, fucking mission accomplished. People have noticed you. A lot of things have already changed in response. Cops have been cops have been arrested. Cops are being charged with murder. Laws have been changed. No-knock warrants have been changed. Some things are already happening in response, but a lot of things that happen in response. But yeah, a lot of the things that happen in response are also the wrong things. Right? Not every cop is responsible for murder in all of these recent cases. Not every statute is. None of the statutes I say need to be torn down prior to a discussion about what the merits of those individuals really were. None of the fucking labels on our products or brands or any of this other stuff that like corporate America is changing. None of that stuff needs to change right now. None of this alarmist, moral panicky kind of like cancel culture wokist symbology needs to fucking flood the entire system, right? That's not what actually needs to happen. There are specific aspects of our legal system that need to change. There are specific aspects of police policy and police policy that need to change. There's specific aspects of drug laws and economics, of course, that need to change. But that is it. That's where the conversation should begin, and anything beyond that is where we go off the rails. And I know I'm fucking right about this simply because I know even trying to say that you shouldn't be panicking or having outrage over or be iconoclastic over all this stuff triggers moral panic in people. They're afraid that there's a system that's out there to crush them, so you can't actually have discourse about the real fucking points of contention and the real solutions. What worries me most about all this is that it will be impossible to have discourse with people about this topic after this. It'll be impossible to have a real discussion because people I'm sensing people becoming thoroughly convinced that we live in some sort of authoritarian hellhole nightmare, and there's no way out but to resist with violence. People are convinced in their powerlessness in a way that is, well, quite frankly, probably unprecedented. And I'm out of fucking time. I can't continue talking about this. There's more things that I wanted to say that I'll have to say at like some other point. But the point is, I just don't think it's a good idea. I think we need to calm down and actually talk about what's happening. Like already, even if we agree that the protest needed to happen from a perspective of alarming the system, that change needs to happen. Okay, message received. Now we need to talk about what to actually do. Okay? That's how I feel. At least from a theoretical perspective. Even if politically the fucking politicians in Washington need to fucking get off their asses and we need to replace them with people who are competent. Theoretically, regardless of what actual policy is, philosophically, these ideas are not solutions to things. There are flaws with them, and those flaws need to be discussed. And that's what I'm going to end with that. Thanks. Cheers.